The Rambam writes in the Laws of Tshuva that foolish people say that people are born with certain profiles and they're locked into that profile, meaning a person is born as a good person and that's why he always does good. And people are born as bad people and that's why they're always perpetrators of evil. Rambam writes this is incorrect, that every person is born at an equidistant point between good and evil, and each person has a choice to go in either direction he chooses. And if you do good, it's due to your initiative of doing good. And if you do evil, you do bad, it's because you took the initiative to do bad. There's no such thing as a person is locked into a position, he must do evil. If that would be the case, he has no level of culpability or liability because it was beyond his ability to do but what he was meant to do. But we're all in a position, we can go in either direction. Therefore, as a result of, it's up to us to take initiatives. The end result, the decision is attributed to ourselves. That's the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. Bob, we're starting. So the Ramchal writes that initially when God created the world, man, we're in a position to do good or evil. But based on our choices, if a person chooses to do evil, which is transgressing the will of God, there's a certain degree of consequence and there's a negative ramification. So the world has to be somehow rebalanced. And sometimes God has to rein in on a person. That's punishment. If you're at the equidistant point, everything's stable, things go well. The moment the world gets destabilized, it starts tilting to the left, God has to reset the balance. Resetting the balance sometimes, God has to withdraw, which is consequently pain. Let's say the world is taken off in the right direction. So the world is invigorated and overwhelming blessing comes to existence. So based on man's behavior, that will determine how God interacts with this world. Whether there'll be blessing, or God forbid, there'll be less blessing, and less blessing could turn into curse. That's how, from the starting point versus beyond the starting point. And whatever direction we take, that's how the world will actually function in that context.
Rabbi, is that the beginning? I had the wrong book. Is that the beginning of part 3? You're 40? No?
1 second. Afternoon service and then evening service ends with Aleinu. Aleinu Shabeach. And the second paragraph of Aleinu L'Shabeach, we say Al Kein Nekaver. We hope to see the moment where God will remove idolatry from this existence and all mankind will recognize God. Meaning at that moment, he's talking about the end of time, God will no longer be in concealment. But as long as there's idolatry, which means that people believe that things happen because of certain powers of existence or for any other reason of existence, that's only because God is not obvious, he's in concealment. We find at the time of the Great Flood, why did God destroy the world? Because the world fell to such a level of evil. God says, this was not my intention of existence. That man should keep perpetrating evil, I will destroy the world. The only survivors of that pre-flood era was Noach and his children, his 3 sons and their wives. When they came out of the ark, God made a covenant with existence. He will never again destroy the world. Why? Because the inclination of man is evil from the moment he's cast from the womb of his mother. So therefore, since man is prone to this level of misbehavior, God says, I'll be destroying the world every so often. If that's the case, I make a covenant with existence, I will not destroy it. And ultimately, the human being will pay its price for that level of failing. That's why the world continues. But God will only allow the world to be taken down to a point. At that certain point, he's going to regenerate by bringing rain in on the people that they should repent, or ultimately he will reveal himself that evil cannot go beyond that point. Because if it goes beyond that point, it's a point of no return and the world has to be destroyed. And this is when Mashiach comes. When the world reaches a level of failing, where they're at the point of no return, the Jewish people will be forced to do tshuva, to repent, and then God will reveal himself, and all evil will be expunged from existence. Man will no longer have choice. This hasn't yet happened. So he explains, if you see the shadow of a man or shadow of anything, sometimes you see a person aging and the person has aged to the point where he's a shadow of what he was in the time of his youth. And the term, he's a shadow. It's an imprint of that original being in terms of his vigor, his drive, his stamina. A semblance is a shadow. What we see of God in this world, even within this existence, because he's in a state of concealment, all we see is the shadow. That's what we see. It's just a slight indication he's involved, but it's enough of indication that if you see the shadow, there's somebody casting that shadow. That means someone is causing this to happen. It's not happening by itself. It's not random. There's enough to be seen of the shadow, and the shadow itself, as the person moves, the shadow moves. As we behave, God interacts, more involved, less involved, withdraws. But that more or less, that shadow indicates where we're holding. Sometimes you say to a person, look yourself in the mirror. And if you're in the mirror, one day you look phenomenal. A few days later, because you didn't sleep, you're becoming malnourished, you look different. So it's all based, what you see, the image you see, the reflection you see in the mirror is based on what your situation is, better or worse. The world situation is based upon how strong is that shadow? Is it a faint shadow? Was it a strong shadow? But one thing for sure, there is someone whose shadow is seen, and that someone is the creator. And he's the one who wills all existence continuously. But it'll reach a point, and I think today we're reaching that point. The breakdown of society. At one time, where people themselves had conscience, people had values, people were bound to a moral, ethical code. To be able to see something, you have to have structure. If there's no structure, everything's in disarray. It's very difficult to see clearly because everything's in disarray. But everything is categorized and orderly and structured, it's easy to discern one from another and to grade things, better, worse. But if the whole system is just totally collapsed, where do you begin? Do you begin from the bottom? Do you begin from the top? Do you evaluate it diagonally, horizontally, vertically? Where do you go? Where do you begin? It looks like there's no rhyme or reason. It's total chaos. But at that moment, that's an indication that evil has reared its head to such a point that God has withdrawn to such a degree, and it's almost impossible to see God in existence. And sometimes you don't see him. That unless you have that, what we call that tradition, you're anchored from the past, and you're so secure to your roots, you only are able to understand, not because you see, it's because you know. You know, I once mentioned the name of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, a person who's an expert art curator. When he sees the master, the Rembrandt, when he looks at that painting, every stroke he sees endless levels of genius. The colors, everything, the way it's put on that piece of canvas. He could see it. He sees clearly. The person who doesn't see is because he doesn't have the expertise to see. What about if that painting would have a veil over it? It's irrelevant what kind of genius is behind that veil, but you know something, you don't see beyond, you can't see through the veil. It's covered. There's a covering on the painting. Evil, which is perpetrated and generated through man's misbehavior, causes God to withdraw to such a degree that he's totally veiled. And it's impossible to see him. But if you saw the Rembrandt before you had that cover put over it, and you know it's the same Rembrandt, you know that genius is behind that veil. But no one who ever saw what's behind that veil just sees a veiled frame, but he's not sure what's in that frame. If a person is a committed Jew and has always been attached, we have the tenets of Jewish belief. We have what we call a Masorah. We have a tradition that regardless of what you see out there is irrelevant. God is the one who wills existence. He's the omnipotent being. So although looking at this society, opening the paper, watching whatever news globally, wherever, the world itself is about to explode, implode, explode, whatever it is. And who's running the society? People are not even fit to be a preschool teacher or at the upper echelons of power deciding what's going on here. And literally, the economy is going, the value system is going, everything's gone. You say, God, what's going on? You know what the answer is? It's all God's plan. If you have that faith and that belief strong and you're secure, I don't understand why, but I know everything's happening so because God's allowing it to happen that way. No other reason. There's no rhyme or reason, but why is there no rhyme or reason? There is rhyme and there's reason. But I don't understand why God allows this rhyme or reason to be in place. There's an answer. Because God is withdrawing. And he's allowed to withdraw to the point where there's going to be a total breakdown. And when that breakdown's going to happen, then he will reveal himself, and then he will expunge all the evil from existence. Because then you'll have an understanding, appreciation, what is and what's not, and what's real and what's not real. What he's willing to tolerate and up to what point he's willing to tolerate it. We find that Paro, the first 5 plagues in Egypt, the revealed miracles, he had the ability to choose. Because God was so obvious, how could you not acknowledge him and recognize him? Paro turned his back on God. God said, you know something? You turn your back on me, you forfeited the right to clarity. And because you chose that you don't want to know me, You're going to be held culpable even when you don't know me, when you should know me, because it's only because you chose not to know me, that's why you don't know me. Therefore, you're held accountable. God is obvious. But if we as mankind choose to turn our back on him and to say, God, it's irrelevant what you think, it's what we want, and we go down that path, God says, if that's the case, you're on your own. I'm not there in a positive way. I will go into the background that you won't even notice me. And you're only going to reinforce the complication of your lives, believing it's you and not him. And as a result of that, things are going to go from bad to worse. You're going to perpetrate evil, which will generate forces, which will take truth and obliterate it from existence. Truth will no longer be seen. You know, it says on the dollar bill, on American, in God we trust. You take a poll in society today in the United States of America, how many people believe in God? Even the people who believe, they say, no, at times I don't believe. Well, it's the founding fathers, you know, they were slave owners. The founding fathers, they were, even though they went against England, they themselves were colonials. All they wanted, they were power mongers. Okay? Therefore, maybe we should take the pictures off the currency. Maybe we should take In God We Trust off maybe we shouldn't allow the Pledge of Allegiance in public schools any longer. Because we're somehow brainwashing the kids to something that they shouldn't be brainwashed. But you can brainwash them for other things. For corrupted, perverted, warped insanity, which is what's going on in our society. But this is all indications of evil rearing its head, because God withdrew and says, you know, as we say, as you make your bed, that's the way you sleep, because that's the way you chose to live your life. That's the way, what kind of life you're going to live. You're going to live in the dark. And the dark you grope, and what you think is one thing, it's something else. You know, it's like a person, he wakes up in the middle of the night and he feels something has a certain like rough feeling. And he thinks he's holding a piece of fabric and has a thickness to it. The lights go on, he sees he's holding a cobra snake, a viper in his hand that's about to puncture his skin and release venom into his system. The man's terrified. When you wake up, you see this. What he thought held out, he was like in a semi-dream state, he thought it was something else. All of a sudden, the lights go on. He goes out of his mind from fear. What he was holding on, could you imagine that's what it was? But that's exactly what people think they're there, but they don't realize they're hanging with a thread. The slightest sever, they go into the oblivion. That's what it is. But this is what God's doing. It's God's doing due to man's choice. The only area of life which we have choice is only regarding choice. But in terms of who we are, what our destiny is, that's given to you by God. What you do with it, that's something else. I give you money to invest. You invest wisely, you have a good return. You invest irresponsibly, you lose everything you were given. And sometimes you lose to the degree you're no longer credit worthy. Nobody's going to give you money any longer. Because due to your misbehavior, nobody's going to trust you that you're able to behave differently than you've behaved in the past. And that's the way God deals with this world. Well, he'll let you go. He'll let you do it. Up to a point. Beyond that point, he's not going to allow mankind destroy his world. He's going to say, up to this point, I'm reining in on you people. I'm going to remove all the impurities of this existence. All that's going to be left is only purity. Even the people who aren't so pure, I will expose them to purity, because I will expunge all evil from this existence. And I believe we're not far from that point. Not far from that. We have to toe the line. We have to live as observant Jews. Because the prescription is, when you do the mitzvah, it infuses the world with spiritual value. And what we do is why God created this world. That despite why not to do, we still do. our leading Torah sages, I knew many of them, they're not alive today any longer. They had a level of genius, recall, insight, presence. If they would have invested those gifts, endowments they had, easily, they would have been the top of the economic system. They would have been Nobel Prize winners in many areas, everything. But they chose, because of what they understood, which has real value, they're going to put their abilities in where God wants them to put the abilities. They once asked the Vilna Gaon why he chose not to be a doctor. The Vilna Gaon knew everything, but he never became involved in medicine, although he knew much of it, because he says, if I would become a doctor, I would have an obligation to heal people. That's my obligation. And if I have an obligation to heal people, it will infringe on my Torah study. Therefore, I prefer not to leave that to doctors, and I'll stay in my area of expertise, which is Torah. That's what he said. See, he chose not to, but that was a choice. Go into medicine, have all the glory, have much more money, have power. But if I do that, I'm locked in because that's my obligation. Even as a Jew, that's your obligation. You have to heal people. But if I choose not to become the doctor, then I have a right to invest my ability and my endowments in what keeps the world going and advancing, which is the Torah itself, which is the mitzvahs themselves. Mentoring students, explaining, being a role model, what's primary, what's secondary. I'll share something very personal with you. Beth, Iran. I came to Baltimore, Beth, in 1962.
Got it.
When you were a young woman, 1962, you were one young woman, yes?
22 years old.
22 years old. I told you, you're a young woman. And that's when I came to near Israel, 1962. My plan was to go to Johns Hopkins University and eventually go to something medical school. That's what I wanted to do. And I was there for 2 years, first 2 years. And I was always a very good student, even before I went to Baltimore. And I was very studious. I was very committed. And at 2 years later, I was 16 years old. I was 16. And I was in a class with boys who were 4 years older than I was. They were 20, 21 years old. I was 16. And I saw, and in those days, a lecture was an hour and 45 minutes every single day, 6 days a week. That was the attention span we had in those days. Could you imagine? The teacher, the rabbi would lecture unceasingly, wouldn't repeat for an hour and 45 minutes every single day. And you would take in all the information. And I personally, thank God, I'm endowed with a good memory. And I would take it all in, remember it, and I'd only write it down afterwards, after the lecture was given. I'd write down whatever I heard. And I would review it, and I would interact with the other students. And so initially, my parents said to me, and I graduated high school, I was at a younger age, even my secular high school. And my parents said, so when are you going to college? I said, Dad, I graduated a year and a half before I was supposed to graduate. I have a year and a half, let me study more. My father says, no problem, you study more. When I would listen to these lectures, it was like I was hearing the most beautiful music. I could listen for hours. I was touched so by the genius and the concepts of the Torah, of the Talmud. I said to myself, something? I'm not sure if I want to become a doctor or a dentist. I'm not sure that's where I want to go. Not sure I want to go there. I don't want to go there. Because today I think where I want to be is somewhere else. I had a choice. And I said, and if it doesn't work out later, I could always go to law school. Because I knew I had the intelligence and the academic skills. I could go to law school. I could do anything. And I chose continuous choices. I'm continuing on this path. So good, again, and because the more I studied, the more clear things became, the more I saw, more knowledge of it became, I saw the value of that knowledge. And because of that, I was pretty much secure and confident that if I have this path, I'm able to continue that trajectory for the rest of my life. Okay? And thank God, since 1962, a lot of water under the bridge. Quite a bit of it. And thank God, a lot of things happened in an exceptionally positive way because of that decision. I have friends, lawyers, doctors, this and that. So they see patients, they heal patients, okay. But I know what I have, I know what they have. They succeeded, they did good things. But I wouldn't change places with them in a million years. Ever, I wouldn't change places with them. Because I know I made the right decision. So again, but the world doesn't see it that way. The professed atheist referred to me when I used to spar with him, you're a provincial Jew. You're this, you're that. You're archaic. You know something? You call me what you want. But you know something? With all your money in the world, it doesn't make a difference what you think I am. I know what I am. And I am you have what you have. So you have an estate up in Westchester, and you have a place in Central America, and you have a place here. Therefore what? Means nothing to me. Means nothing. Has nothing to do with you. Who are you? Who are you? You have things, but who are you? I know who I am. I know what I possess. It may not be material things, but you know something? I'm okay. I'm happy with my lot. More than happy with my lot. And that's the answer. But the world sees it different. The world is dark. The world is off the cliff. Okay, what can you do? So it's only because of my background and what I'm rooted in, despite what I see may irk me, but you want to know something? Because what I see, that's God's plan. Because of man's misbehavior, the world looks the way it looks. And we speak about cumulative. Person eats certain carcinogenics and ingests them, initially doesn't affect the person. But over years, cumulatively speaking, God forbid a person could develop cancer or other serious terminal illnesses, because it's cumulative. What's been going on, it didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for many, many years. The decline of society, the quality of life, meaning I'm talking about value-wise, ethically, morally, whatever it may be. And they keep pushing the envelope to a greater degree. But that's all derivatives and consequences of wrong choices, what we call evil, and evil breeds evil, and that's why we're at where we're at today. And God says up to a point, once it reaches that critical mass point, I will reveal myself, I will expunge the world from evil, and that is the coming of Mashiach.